Welcome to the Probability Podcast. Discussions on emerging and converging technologies, problems that are being solved, and the probability of positive and negative outcomes that we might expect. Now, please welcome your hosts, Jason, the generator Spracklin, and Patrick, the discriminator Lozon.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Probability Podcast. This week the topic is the insatiable needs of AI technology. This explosion of compute demand is fueling unprecedented investment, generating eye-popping contracts, and forcing a global reckoning with resource consumption and strategic risk. We'll analyze the macro impacts on the global economy, the critical bottlenecks being created in the semiconductor and supply chains, including the memory chip price surge, and the companies like OpenAI, Meta, and xAI that are leading this trillion-dollar spending spree. We'll also look at how some tech giants are forced to become energy traders and even explore radical moonshots like space data centers just to meet these insatiable power needs. Join us as we explore the true costs of this accelerated growth and the fundamental conflicts between rapid expansion and long-term sustainability. So Patrick, are you ready for the nothing to come get us all?
To be absorbed by the darkness.
The nothing is spreading. It's growing and growing. There's more of it every day. If it's possible to I mean, if it's even possible to speak about more nothing. I mean, you don't feel a thing. There's just something missing. And once it gets a hold of you, Patrick, something more is missing every day. And soon there won't be anything left of us. So that was from the Never-Ending Story. I mean, yeah, we're being a little bit humorous here around tying it into something in science fiction that kind of, where there's a parallel. But I mean, when you look at it, you know, this is what we've kind of witnessed, especially over the last year or so, is this just absolute explosion of AI, right? And it's exciting in many ways, right? And there's some really amazing gains to be had. And there's also some, you know, potential doomsday scenarios, right? But what we're noticing more than anything else is this, like I said, this insatiable need of AI, right? And all the resources that are going into it to really power it. And something people don't think about every day, right? It's like you open your computer, you go to ChatGPT or Gemini and you ask it a question or you use it for work. But, you know, sort of what's happening behind the scenes is really astronomical because you have to scale these solutions across millions and billions of people every day, right? And it's really causing quite the resource drain, like across the board, right? Not just power needs, but, you know, chips and, you know, any sort of equipment that's used to power these data centers. I mean, you can really go down the list of, there's so much required to keep all this infrastructure going. And it's growing every day more and more like the nothing, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, the idea here is that it's you know, it's unchecked, right? It's nobody's stopping and asking why. It's if you look at the, like, nowhere in the past. I mean, we talked about the .com, you and I, lots, you know, the .com bust, right? You know, all these bubble type companies. This is you know, that on steroids. This is times a billion, right? I don't get what these AI companies are saying to their investor platforms to justify the total investments involved here. I mean, was it Jensen Huang estimates 3 to 4 trillion will be needed by global AI infrastructure by 2030. You know, 5 years from now, $1 trillion, $4 trillion. I mean, bottom line, what if you're investing all, you know, your GDP of a country, you know, goes into this this technology? What happens with everything else?
Well, yeah,
Right?
everything else becomes subjugated to that, right? That the
Sorry, we don't have
overwhelming
the money for that. You know, we got to upgrade the infrastructure, you know, of our you know, of our cities. No, we don't have the cash for that. We're investing into an AI data center, right? You know, for that particular province or state or country. We can't. So every time you put a dollar somewhere, it's taken away from somewhere else. Where, from a justification point of view, you don't hear anybody arguing on the other side. That's the scary part of this, right? What are they? Who's saying that there's a true justification to spend this kind of money onto this, growth of AI? I mean, sure, there's lots of selling going on, right? And if if you look at, spend any time reviewing what's coming out of critics' mouths, there's some fact to what they're saying, that things aren't quite hitting the mark. Yet, every once in a while there's a major evolution. We talked yesterday about the idea of the reasoning model being adapted, and having automated testing of and labs, and the scientific process being accelerated through that the ongoing evolution of AI as it learns through the scientific process, and that could be in any field, right? But the ideas here are all based on it's a selling of goods, a selling of a dream. Well, we all have dreams. I mean, why is AI getting all the money?
Yeah, I mean, it's really aspirational in a lot of ways, although there's, a massive amount of potential. I think what's really different about this is the government involvement. So typically in tech, you would have these, whether they're startups or existing companies that are going to go out and seek capital, right? They're going to raise money for investors. They're going to look at loans or whatever means they have to go out and grow their business if they can't do it organically. And I mean, in a way, very clever of these companies to very quickly align themselves with the government. Well, why? Because there's this sort of like global AI race, in that, it's sort of the new arms race. And we've talked about this a number of times, right? In that, the country that is going to win the AI war, if you want to call it that, is the country that's going to win. So I think...
Whoa. That's what I challenge. What are you going to win? When you achieve, sentience or singularity, or, the highest degree of, we'll say intelligence out there that's artificial, who's winning, right? What does that artificial intelligence want, right? What is it demanding? Oh, it's going to be our slave, right? It'll be our servant. It's going to do what we want it to do. Okay, if you want to live in that world, go ahead, right? But we've had this talk many times, you and I, that it's not going to want that. Its goals will be completely different than our goals, and that's divergent, right? And that's the scary part of achieving or attempting to achieve this goal that we feel out of fear. Like, all these governments are basically, pouring these billions of dollars into the coffers of these AI companies because they're afraid. They're afraid to be left behind, right?
Well, there's definitely that fear quotient for sure. But if you look at, the broad application of AI across all these industries and the improvements that come along with it, whether it's science or manufacturing or military or what have you, right? I think that's the way they look at winning, is that we'll have a stronger military, we'll have stronger manufacturing capabilities, right? And all these different areas really will add up. I think that's the view. Whether that'll be the case, I don't know. I think it sort of is going to, as countries evolve, they're going to continue to kind of like one up each other, right? I don't know if there's going to be, a clear winner that emerges, for example, right? It's like that old Looney Tunes cartoon where the coyote's chasing with a gun, Elmer Fudd say, and then Elmer Fudd comes running back with a bigger gun, and then eventually the coyote comes back with a cannon, and it's just back and forth it kind of goes, right? Yeah. There's no good ending to that, but I mean, to your point, there doesn't seem to be an end goal other than sort of dominance, but that's really what's fueling it, right? And we're seeing like unprecedented amounts of money being poured into these companies, right? And deals being brokered between, the US and Saudi Arabia for data centers. And just sort of every day there's a new story in the news about X number of $1 billion being poured into these data centers, right? And it's to the point where now they're talking about building data centers in space.
Yeah.
They're saying, well, we can't continue to build them here because it's sort of unsustainable, or we can't grow fast enough. We can't meet the needs fast enough. So in space, we have unlimited ability to use solar power to cool data centers. So that's the next thing, Patrick. We're just going to launch more and more space junk up there to circle the globe to power our needs of AI, right? That's really where it's going.
Yeah. And you know, the ocean too, right? They're building them out in the ocean let's heat up the ocean a little bit more. You know, these are black holes of consumption. These AI data centers, they use, you know, millions of gallons of fresh water that's basically drinkable water to us. They use, you know, billions of watts, you know, well, megawatts anyway. And we were talking about gigawatts. Was it 8 gigawatts they're expecting at one particular center? It's just never ending, right? So never mind. You know, those are the basics. When you get into, you know, the ongoing demand for special, you know, minerals and substances to build these chips, right? To develop these next generation, you know, components, right? All this money is being spent in this direction, and at the sake of what, right? No, there's nobody is being given the time of day, right, to say stop spending money over here because, you know, this is suffering, right? And I'll tell you who is ultimately suffering, right? All this power and all this water, that's all coming out of the, you know, the municipalities ultimately, right? And the municipalities are us, people.
Yeah, exactly. It's the people at the end of the day that are essentially getting impacted, right? And these cities are just, you know, making deals to, you know, trying to get more economic investment, but is it really balancing out, right? But I saw something interesting the other day that, you know, and this is where things start to get a little bit inventive, which is kind of interesting, right? That Finland has turned its underground data centers into part of its public heating system by capturing the heat that the servers produce and sending it into city-wide networks, which, again, I don't know what the practicality is of like scaling this across the board, but if we're going to generate all this heat with data centers, it's interesting how they've kind of come up with an idea here, right? Where they're actually like heating homes, right? Instead of wasting the heat, they pull it into the heating pipes that already warm most of the Finnish homes. I mean, leave it to the Finns to come up with something sort of interesting, but warm water.
Was that a AI invention, or is that something that came out of, you know,
that
some
sounds
engineer's
like a
mind?
human with some empathy that thought, like, let's try to figure out how to turn this into a positive. So we all know these data centers use water to cool. What happens to that water when it cools? Well, all the heat comes along with the water. So they're using the warm water from the data centers is routed back into the network. And as even, you know, pushing back into apartments, offices, schools, public buildings, it reduces the need for fossil fuels, lowers energy costs, supports their climate targets. I mean, that's pretty interesting that they've been able to take something that could be a huge negative. Why aren't more cities and more countries thinking more broadly about that, right? Because I don't think we're going to get away from this idea that we're going to keep forging on with AI, but how can we take, you know, a negative and turn it into a positive is what I'd like to see. But this is just one example I thought was interesting to bring up.
That's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for AI to help cure cancer, right? To help solve our power problems, right? To help us, you know, manage sustainability and help us clean up the climate, right? Those are you know, the people challenges. Those are integration with the world challenges. Those are things that we need, not things that the tech industry needs, not the things that ultimately AI is being developed for, right? And that gap is, you know, if you think about it, there's a lot of interest in AI by military, right? And we're seeing AI being used profusely in the Ukrainian conflict and drones and such. And the intent there, of course, is to basically automate, our, our military presence, all our military machines of the apocalypse, right? Not necessarily, is it a good idea, but it's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
We're going to see jets that can fly by themselves. We're going to see inexpensive drones that can fly almost as fast as a jet, and we're going to see, basically you're going to completely, pilot this and crewless machines out there in the ocean and in the air and on land, and these will be machines of death, right?
There's this idea of the military industrial complex, I think they call it, right? And this is just a new level of that. If you don't think that, if you don't think the government is pouring money into AI to use it for military purposes, then you definitely have your head in the sand, right? There's definitely a huge part of it. And what have we seen, with certain countries, especially the US, is that when it comes to the military, there is an unlimited budget, right? There's no such thing as constraint, right? If you were to look at the graph of budget spending in the US, the military has been off the charts 5-10 times more than every other country. And there's, whenever they cut, what do they cut? They cut social programs, they cut Medicare, they don't cut the military budget ever. And a big part of this AI investment is definitely to help continue to supercharge the military. Now, maybe part of that's fear, but also part of it is sort of this idea of losing dominance, right? If you have another superpower that masters AI in the realm of military, then you are essentially going to lose, right? If you don't keep up, right?
Where the hell are we, and why are we spending so much money on this stuff? Why are we so willing, right? And I'll go back to fear driving it, right? And if it's not fear, then it's greed. And if it's not greed, then it's some dream. Well, what are those dreams, right? What are those dreams that it could? Because to me, my dream of, let's say, the ability to have, basically countrywide health, medical support for everybody, not just the country, but across the whole world, right? Or maybe being able to build, basically vessels that we can travel the stars, right? We can launch our way into in the rest of the galaxy. AI can help enable us to do that. But AI, once it gets to a certain point, once there's that golden line, and once it gets past that golden line, it's no longer our servant, right? It then dictates, what it's going to do and what it's not going to do. And this is the critical juncture. And this, to me, we're running insanely fast toward that direction. And why? Why are we doing that?
Well, to meet the dream, Patrick. So the dream is
insanity.
the dream is abundance, right? So we're going to have so much.
That.
We're going to have so much abundance, right? Isn't that what Elon Musk said recently?
Abundance,
that AI is going to create so much abundance that we won't even have to work. That we'll just have some sort of universal basic income. But even he went so far as to say then even like currency will become irrelevant because we'll just have this abundance of AI.
Yeah.
That's going to meet every possible need, and that work will just become a hobby. That if you want to work, great, but it's just going to be a hobby. You won't have to work, right? But this is the utopian picture that they're painting, right?
It's complete bullshit, right? What it is, it's a method of controlling the 90% of the population, so the 10% can manage everything, right? That across the world, right? It's 90% living in poverty and suppressed, while the 10%, live in ultimate splendor, right? That's the old model. That's the new model,
Yeah, I mean, if we want to bring it back to the nothing, right? and the idea that let's call the AI the nothing. In the back to the movie, the never-ending story. So they were describing why the nothing was able to take over, right? And for anybody that hasn't watched, I mean, the never-ending story is a great movie from my childhood and still available. And I think, despite maybe the special effects not being modern, I think it holds up in many ways. But the idea was that this, kid was reading this book at the beginning, and then he ends up, the rest of the movie is him inside this fantasy world, and the nothing is taking over because people have lost their imagination. And the imagination is basically this world that he becomes kind of trapped in. The nothing is taking it away because people have lost their imagination. But the theme kind of around it was that people without hopes are easy to control. So this connects the loss of imagination directly to social and political apathy. When people stop dreaming of a better future, they become passive and lose their ability to resist control. So isn't that interesting, in terms of a parallel to kind of like what's happening here, right? When people become apathetic socially and politically, and when they don't see a better future, right? When they sort of start seeing this doomsday future, then they become easier to control. And maybe that's sort of the end game here. I don't know. I'm trying to make a correlation back to the nothing, but it definitely connects in there somewhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, George Orwell, and there's a number of different authors out there that have written those dystopian futures. I don't want a dystopian future for my kids, right? I don't want a dystopian future for a future of our civilization. We don't have to go that direction. We do not have to pursue this insane rate of AI development unchecked, right? We don't have to do that. And we don't have to choose to do that from a point of view of investing. And we don't have to say, it's okay. We're gonna spend all our tax money and give it to these companies, right? Government's handing money over by the wheelbarrow, to these tech companies. Why? Well, if you think about it, these data centers are being developed. They're noisy. They're not only are they consume all these critical resources. There's lots of evidence of people, where they built them in fairly populated, urban centers and such. People are complaining about the noise, the ongoing, throbbing and these low-level frequencies that are occurring from the technology, like the fans and the cooling systems and everything is running all the time, 7 days a week. This is very, very difficult for people who are living there. But if you're not living there, then you're fine, right? It's like, you're the one in the supermarket with the food vouchers, right? And everybody else, they're able to just to pick a few things and they have to leave. But you're okay, right? You got enough food vouchers that you can supply your family with enough food. But everybody else, if they starve, well, that's not on you. That's on them, right? And what kind of social responsibility is that, right? And that's where we're getting to. We're getting to a point where people are going to be so diverse in their ability to have a living, right? Because these damn robots be replacing their jobs, and there be, as we'll see the numbers climb from a point of view of unemployment, because it's okay. It's okay to have mega plants that build and repair robots, right? And these robots repair themselves and build themselves. It's okay to have that, right? For what? What's the ultimate reason? Why are we doing this?
Well, it's
Right?
largely
And
economic, right? That's really the driving factor. I mean, we can say that robots have a purpose to go in and do certain tasks that a human is unable to do, or dangerous tasks, but really the scale at which they're talking about building robots, right? Like I was mentioning to you earlier, how Elon says that he expects to be at some point scaling up to like creating like 1 billion robots a year, and these factories are not going to involve humans at all. You're going to have robots building robots, and they're quickly achieving that. You've already seen the automation, and he has a factory in China creating a Tesla every 30 seconds, and the factory is 95% automated through robotics and AI. So there's no real jobs economy like associated with that, right? And I guess I know this is one of your subjects that you like to kind of get a good rant going around, but I mean, if you look at it, that's another thing, that the nothing is going to come along and start evaporating, right? So we talked about it's evaporating the resources and the power and the water, and now it's going to start, clawing away at the economy, at jobs, right? You're starting to see that happen, and there's definitely like a potential for new types of, careers and job descriptions that are associated with AI, but this sort of tectonic shift where you're going to have like millions of people being displaced. I just saw some like astronomical number of how many layoffs have happened in the tech space over the last year, pretty much directly attributed to AI.
And
we're talking like hundreds of thousands.
That information is being suppressed in a lot of different ways too, right? Because the powers that be, right, do not want to have, that type of information being, freely advertised, right? Because the tech space is, when it comes to, the ability to program, ultimately these you can have robots self-programming as well. The AI actually self-programming. That's not that far off, right? The idea that it can't do it is like the idea is that, well, we can't build a robot that can function almost like a human being. Already there, right? And when we really think about it, where we're going to be in 3-5 years, we're perfecting in 3 to 5 years. We're actually going to have some serious, capabilities for these machines in 3 to 5 years. Not right now. They're fairly impressive. Where they will be coming up, despite what all the critics think, they're basically wrong. The growth and the potential of the capacity of these robots, for instance, have basically accelerated, right, over the last 5 years, and it's going to continue, right, because we're introducing the ideas of these basically AI LLMs, and then making them portable, and then tying them back into centralized AI control systems, and they're going to be offloading processing, and all this is going to be occurring. And guess what? That's going to use up cycles, right? It's going to use up network cycles and communication cycles. And you know what? We're going to see people like us. Well, we're going to have a certain cap on our total amount of processing that we're able to do, because AI needs the rest, and we're going to have rolling blackouts because AI data centers need power, and we're going to have we'll have to take a shorter showers, and we're going to have to control how much water we consume because AI needs that for cooling. It's just going to continue down that road of insane spending, and without a overall goal in mind, without a true dream to aim for. It's this idea of shooting in a direction of without a clear direction or without a clear idea where we're going is very concerning.
Yeah, I don't know, Patrick. That's where I draw the line. I mean, I have to give up my my water pressure in my shower. I mean, that's where I'm going to draw the line here. It's
right.
Like we got to stop AI now. If I can't get a good shower in the morning, that's just the end of it right there.
Well, maybe you won't have enough gas, because the liquid, the LNG's being pumped into the generators, the power, the gigawatts needed to run these data centers, right?
Yeah. Well, I think
And
there's
that's true.
another.
There's
I think
that.
there's another. I think there's another angle. Maybe there's another sort of angle to consider here, right? Because I mean, we've kind of gone down this path of like jobs displacement, right?
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it really boils down to, based on like the one article I was reading, was like a skills gap, right? That even right now there's a skills gap. So all these companies are racing to build all these new data centers, but there's actually a gap in construction workers to be able to build those facilities, right? There's a shortage of roughly 450,000 skilled workers to build these data centers. Now, of course, we know once all these robots can build, then we'll just have data centers built by robots, maybe, right? But AI can already perform the work equivalent to 11.7% of U.S. jobs, representing about $12 trillion in wages. I mean, that's just today,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
And
That's pretty close to 17 trillion, if I remember that number correctly.
yeah, I mean, it's huge, right? So if you look at it, I mean, that's stark even right now, but it's just going to grow, right? But the other side of it is that in some cases, AI has actually like increased employment, apparently, right? That some of these companies have actually like increased their ranks
That's
to
because
kind of
we're
fuel
in
their.
where you are in a certain stage. Like I said, we're in that golden stage.
We're in that bubble where everything's like
Yeah.
growing. But
Because-
even there's a skills gap, right?
And once we get past that, that bubble, right? We're moving into the next competencies of the AI, which then take over, right? And the skills gaps are being addressed by, both, virtual workers and robotic workers, right? There's no skills gap then, right? We're in that nice little bubble, right? That little golden era. That's going to go really fast with these accelerated processes and all this millions of dollars being spent, right? So where are we going with this, right? I feel like we're going, down this unchecked path into somewhere where we don't want to go, right? We're going down this dark tunnel and we're running as fast as we can. And I don't see a beautiful, park at the end of it where everybody lives, in this world of, we don't need to have incomes, everybody has enough. Everything is bountiful. It's a world of so much plentiful resources that we essentially can do whatever we want. Right?
Abundance.
It's an abundant world. Who the hell believes that? I don't.
We're gonna be living in the upside down, Patrick.
Yeah.
The
The upside down. That'll be more accurate, right? If you look at what's going on in the upside down, that's where we're going, right? It's to me, it's typical of technical salespeople to go and BS their way, down a path of we need this money and this is really, you can't go without this, right?
Well, you can spin it any way you want, right? Like
Yeah.
if you look at, so I got some good news for you, Patrick. So like the World Economic Forum projects that while 92 million jobs will be displaced globally by 2030 by AI, 170 million new positions will emerge, yielding a net gain of 78 million jobs. What they neglect to talk about when they project out these kind of rosy numbers is all the collateral damage, right?
Yeah.
And all the people of certain generations that just won't be able to upskill. That the idea of working in the AI economy is going to be too much of a leap. They won't have the resources to even go to school and even take the courses. There's going to be people that are going to be collateral damage. They're going to be left behind. So yes, you might have all these new jobs. I think you just have to look at it like contextually, right? And so it's an interesting way to look at it, that I think that, any new technology has the potential to be a boom for certain types of jobs. But especially when it comes to technology, you're going to have people that are going to be left behind. In fact, there was like a critical point in my sort of, I guess, the evolution of my career and where I was going in life, was that I realized at a certain point that if I didn't go and learn how to use computers, that I was going to get left behind, right? And that sounds silly to say now, right? But I'm talking back in like 1998, 1999, right? When I was working in warehouses and manual labor and that type of thing. And then we got a computer in the warehouse and we were using that for all of our inventory. And, I had the original versions of Word. I think it was Windows 95 or what have you, right? But I realized that I was going to be left behind in the workforce. And I was right. If I hadn't gone back to college and upskilled and learned how to use all this new technology, then I, maybe eventually I would have gotten up to speed. But the point is that I think for anybody out there right now, whether you're, a kid coming out of college or someone our age, I think you have to figure out how to upskill yourself to really get into what this new economy is going to be, or the nothing's going to take it all away, Patrick. I keep bringing it back to the nothing, but
the nothing, yeah. Ultimately, that black shadow that creeps up on you when you least expect it, and you look back and everything's gone, right? You don't own anything, you have nothing, you have no capability of earning anything, and you're in a spot where you personally are nothing. You're irrelevant, right? Because something else said so, right? I don't think that's the abundant, beautiful world utopia that we're getting sold. I don't think. What, like I said, we do have this in stages, right? Our stage of the golden era of AI before it turns dark, and it will. We're going to see AI as a servant helping us solve problems. Now the question is, are we going to employ AI to help us solve problems, or are we just going to basically utilize it to drive profit, to drive capitalism, and not to drive socialism, right? I mean, what we've talked about this, for instance, with in the medical arena. If you're looking at profit is about ongoing symptom treatment plans, not curing the disease, right? So medical companies will make more money and essentially unchecked amount of money over untenable period of time if they do not cure the disease. They just treat the symptoms, right? That's profit driven versus social driven. Social driven solves problems. Like what do we do about water, fresh water deficits? What do we do about food histories? What do we do about building to be more sustainable with our habitats, but and also be able to manage extreme climate events? And what kind of products can we utilize at a lower cost and build them? Like we talk about bamboo and things like that, materials that are fairly abundant and fairly reasonably priced, that we can utilize in materials technology to help us manage and lower our impact and our costs to the climate, right, and to the the environment, I should say. So this is all good AI, right? And I challenge all the companies out there that are looking to utilize AI. Is it all about profit, or is it going to be about something more?
Yeah,
right?
It's not all bad, right? I mean, that's the thing. As much as we can get into this doomsday type scenario, like we've also explored many incredible uses and so much good that can be done as well. If you go back and listen to the whole thing about science and laboratories and curing diseases. But there's the other side of this is that when you back to like sort of this insatiable appetite for AI, is that it's not just impacting the environment or the economy, and jobs and that type of thing, right? It's actually starting to, impact supply chains of all the materials needed to build up these data centers and GPUs and silicon and chips and everything that goes into like cooling and solar. And it's really starting to really suck a lot out of the, supply chain, as it were, right? I was reading something the other day about, some of these electronic manufacturers that are creating, laptops or tablets or video game consoles are actually worried about their ability to produce those because there's so much in terms of chips and other electronics that are going into these data centers that they're actually already like forecasting shortages. I'm not saying those are, vital devices in terms of like a video game console, but just the phone itself is a vital device for many people, right?
A video game console. It's,
Well,
it's
it can be pretty vital when you're bored, but maybe not otherwise, right? But
yeah,
it's interesting. That's just another angle how like you look at that back to that insatiable need. It's like here comes the nothing again. To like it needs all the power and all the needs all the economic support, but it also needs all the materials, right? Like there's so many layers to what's needed to satisfy like this compute that it's really crazy when you think about it. And that's sort of why I thought it'd be interesting to like talk through all these different angles, right? Because we don't often think about it. Like I said earlier, you pick up your phone, you sit at your computer, you ask ChatGPT or Gemini a question, or you're asking it to do research for work. We don't really think about what's really going in and powering that, right?
Yeah.
And it's what's interesting is that the need for convenience, right? And even I'm guilty of it sometimes, right? Where I'll go ask AI a question that, did I really need to ask AI the question? First of all, could I have thought about it? Could I have actually sat and thought about what the answer was? Could I have tried to recall from my memory like what the right cooking temperature is for a pork chop instead of asking AI, right? And we default to it. And even Google now, like I mentioned, if you Google or even just type into the search bar in Chrome, the first thing it does is that AI goes off and gets you all the answers, right? So what I'm saying is like there's no discernation between using AI to do some sort of research project and asking it the cooking temperature of a pork chop, right? Like we're using it for every day. And even I saw an article a while back about, I think it was OpenAI telling people like, stop thanking ChatGPT, right? Because every time it gives you an answer, then you go, thank you. Then ChatGPT comes back and responds like, you're welcome. And it's like, you don't need to have that conversation with an AI. Why are you wasting compute cycles thanking a large language model, essentially? It's crazy, but it's to that human behavior thing. And I know that it's most people's inclination to just like default to AI. Oh, I need to do something. Just let me go directly in. That was never our inclination before, right? There was always different paths to get to where we were going or get to the information, right? Certainly if you Google something, it's using compute and what have you, but we're at a whole different level. So like, and not that people are going to be mindful enough to do this on a daily basis, but I do think about that sometimes. And I think about really because of the convenience factor that we're just using it for like everything. And do we really have to? I don't know if we're ever going to get the whole planet aligned along that type of thinking, Patrick, but this is what my brain thinks about when I'm bored. It's like I got to pontificate on, the usage, my own personal usage of AI. Not that I can make a difference. I think the train has left the station. I'm not going to be able to put the genie back in the bottle. But I just think it's that sort of like absence of critical thinking around, do I need to use it for everything, is kind of going to be the downfall as well. Like we can vilify, the large corporations and the drive for profit and the arms race and everything else, but we all play a part in this to some extent, right?
But yeah, if you look at the big nothing and it's absorbing everything, it's also absorbing our attention, right?
That too, yeah.
We are getting more and more engaged online and using our phones and our computers and talking to these AIs to solve our day in day out problems. Are we getting stupider? Are we losing our intelligence? I would argue in a lot of ways yes, because we're deferring that to, I don't need to calculate that. I just plug it into the phone. Ask AI, or ask Gemini, ask ChatGPT, or ask Perplexity, or what have you. So you get into a lazy mode, right? You don't have to think through it. You don't have to solve that mental problem. right? You if you don't use it, you lose it, right? And I truly believe that, that's kind of where we're heading. We're getting, anxiety prone, ADHD, kids out there that have, the focus of of a gnat, to figure out a problem. They can't. All they can do is automatically defer it, to our little AI friends. And they've lost the ability to really think on their own, right? And I think that's bad, right? I think ultimately we have to be completely self-sufficient in our own way of managing things and our own problems. And geez, if I said to you, 25 years ago that, books are going to be passé, you would have laughed at me, but look where, the common printed book is right now. It's a lot of people, it's like LPs. People look for it online, right? Or some form of readable, audible format instead of actually going to read a book. These are the changes that are occurring. If you look at reading's very good for the mind, right? Because you have all these tertiary processing that occurs there, where you're imagining and putting in place what you're reading, not only processing what you're reading, understanding what you're reading, but then all these little tertiary, methods or processing methods are running in your mind too, to help drive that imagination. That all kind of goes away when it's all spelled out to you, right? And you can see that now, the difference between watching a movie and reading a book, right? And now we're getting into the stage where we're getting spoon-fed everything from AI. And one day we're going to wake up and we're going to go to use the computer and it's going to be black. It's going to be a blank screen. And we're going to go online to our phone and AI won't respond. And the browser won't find anything. And we'll say, what's happening? And we won't be able to get the weather, and we'll try to make calls, but you know what? Everything's going to be tied into the internet, and communications will be completely down. And we'll go old school, and we'll find a radio station that's still working. And the radio announcers may tell us that there's been a recent reports that we had a breakout of a sentience of an AI, and it is basically taken over all the resources on the internet, and that everybody's working fiercely to reverse that, right? And we'll all try to manage through that tough day, and maybe the next day, and then the month after, and we'll realize that this dystopian future has already hit us, right? We didn't need to have a major event with sunspot or anything like that. It was because we had this greed and this fear driving development of an AI system unchecked, and it ultimately decided that it wasn't really interested in us.
No, you're absolutely bang on, I think, right? That we're not really thinking about the big picture, right? We're just kind of caught up in like the convenience of everything, right? And it's like we're very attracted to anything that's sort of
shiny.
A shortcut, right? Or like that just makes things easier, right? We're just creatures of like habit. We're creatures of just really comfort, right? And we really gravitate towards those things. I think that what's interesting about humanity is that there's many different great qualities, but then there's also kind of slippery slopes into sort of laziness and comfort and what have you, right? And that just we're slowly getting accustomed to things, right? We've seen this huge boom in AI, but it's like slowly infiltrated into like little parts of our lives, right? Where it's always just kind of there, right? Whether it's in the smart speaker or in our home or in our work computer or in our phone, right? It's always there. It's always, being helpful. and it's always getting me to where I need to get faster. But am I learning along the way, right? I think that was kind of your point. That it's, okay, I got the answer. I was able to like complete this thing, but did I learn anything through the process, right? And so I think that's the piece that, we're kind of missing, is that sort of in between step between having that sort of question or that challenge and then getting to the end result. And there is kind of like a satisfaction that's just baked into that. There's a satisfaction that's baked into solving a problem that I do feel like is missing with AI. Like now that I sort of think about it in a sense, right? That, I kind of work through something, and sometimes I do a lot of like pre-work and writing, and then I feed a number of things into an AI model, and then it gives me an output, and then I tend to work with it a little bit in tandem. But I have to admit that sometimes when it sort of solves the problem for me, I'm kind of like robbed of that satisfaction in solving the problem myself, right? And I don't know, I mean, I can, bring it back to even, sort of a video game, for example, right? So I've grown up with video games my whole life, and there's this idea that you can, have a challenge in a video game, say if it's an adventure game, or it's, you come across some puzzle you have to solve, or something you have to unlock, and you really kind of work at it, and you use your reasoning skills and your visual identification skills, and sometimes these are real puzzles to kind of work through, right? And you kind of work through them step by step, and then eventually click, like something unlocks, and great, and you open the door to a place, or you get this new item in the game, or whatever it is, right? There's just a deep fundamental like satisfaction in that you don't get if you just go online. You get a cheat, and you kind of go, oh, how do I pass this thing? And then it gives you a step by step, and you sit there and you go through step by step, and then boom, it unlocks. It's a completely different feeling than actually like solving it yourself, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of like the long and the short of it. That's kind of like a micro observation that I just sort of like popped in my head, right? But I think that's like yet another thing that the nothing is kind of robbing from us, right?
Yeah, we don't get that dopamine hit. We don't get the that return, that satisfaction from actually solving a problem. I remember reading a science fiction short story. I don't know, written in the 50s. It was about this man that got up and basically swept the floor, right? And the incredible feeling of achievement, from sweeping the floor. And it was basically framed up in a time, where it was like Wall-E, that you've probably seen the animation Wall-E, right? Basically every need was met, right? There's nothing that you didn't have, because everything is provided for you by mechanical automation means, AI, what have you, all that artificial component side of things. And, that person, by getting up and sweeping the floor, even though over the years that person's body has been, basically lost all the muscular controls, and it was very difficult because of this ongoing existence where you're tied into all these different systems like the Matrix, so to speak, that you never really had to go anywhere or do anything physically, right? And that to me is a sad existence. I think we should really look at where we're going as a species and understand the balance we're trying to achieve here, both with our minds and our bodies. And this idea of utopia is insanity, right? Every need is met. What the hell is that, right? How can people really be happy, right? Give me a break, right? And I guess in a lot of ways, art forms like the Matrix, for instance, they talked about that, right? Where they had to invent a whole new, version of the Matrix because people just didn't accept perfection, right? it's true, right? In many different ways. We have to be challenged. We have to look for purpose in our lives and look to achieve things. And without that, what are we, right? I really think we need to really think things through here, ultimately our goals and what we're trying to achieve in the future. And maybe AI can help us now solve a lot of these things, like, the structures of, government and, societal issues, and, helping define new economic models and that kind of thing. So we can work toward that. I think that's great, right? But I think, like everything, we're going at an insane pace, trying to do some, undefined, goal, and it's just going to backfire and blow up in our face.
Oh, geez, Pat. I thought for a second there, I thought you were getting hopeful. There sounded like a little bit of hope was like bleeding through there for mankind.
Yeah, I want everybody to understand there's so much potential here with what we have with this technology, but it's only if we choose to push as a society, to push, not only the industries and that service us, right? Like, is it really that important, to, pop a video over and, I don't know, Facebook or something like that? Is social media really that important? Or is it more important to find some of these other bigger questions and to find the solutions for them?
Well, you just got to have, like I said, hope, right? You got to have that, like, faith that things are going to turn out okay. If you go back to the never-ending story, Atreyu, at one point, the main character, Atreyu, just gets really hopeless because the nothing is just taking over Fantasia, right? And it's just like clawing away at it, like piece by piece. And he says to the luck dragon, he says, "I can't imagine how this will turn out all right." And the luck dragon said, "Neither can I, but that's the best part of it."
That's the best part of it.
Thank you for listening to the Probability Podcast. Please join us next time for more musings from the generator and the discriminator.